Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with people who give shape, texture, and voice to life on the North Fork of Long Island. Some are rooted here by generations, others arrived by chance or choice, but all carry with them a piece of the story. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 224, we're joined once again by Michael Zweig to revisit a pivotal decade in the life of the North Fork, the 10-year struggle for its character and economic base from 1985 to 1995. Michael first visited the North Fork in the 1960s, returning more permanently in the 1980s, at a moment when the future of the region was very much an open question. Would the North Fork follow a path of planning, agriculture, and preservation, or be paved over by unchecked development? That tension between developers, environmentalists, and longtime residents shaped nearly every decision the town faced. In this conversation, Michael reflects on his growing involvement in the community, from joining the town of Southold's Economic Advisory Committee in 1985 to helping examine the future of agriculture at a time when new forms of farming, including the emerging wine industry, were beginning to redefine the land. He discusses grassroots organizing to protect open space, including the formation of Southold 2000, which later evolved into the North Fork Planning Conference. We also talk about the political shakeup of the early 1990s, when dissatisfaction with major parties led to the creation of United Southold, a new local political movement founded by Tom Wickham. Though short-lived, its 1993 victory reshaped political dynamics of the town and left a lasting imprint on how Southold governs itself. Along the way, Michael shares his decision to join the Southold Fire Department. We close by turning to the present, the pressures facing the North Fork today, and Michael's hopes for preserving the balance between community, environment, and the economy in the years ahead. So I hope you enjoy episode 224 with Michael Zweig. This episode was recorded April 30th, 2025. Thank you so much for coming back on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. It's great to have you back on again.
It's great to be with you again.
Thank you. So we have a previous episode that will have been released that will be about Michael Zweig's career and background that you can listen to. But for this episode, it's going to be more, we're going to focus in on his time coming out to the North Fork and working with Southold and the politics out here today. So I think the first thing I want to get started, you were working at Stony Brook in the 60s. Tell us the first time you initially, because I think you mentioned, or we were discussing off air about you had come out with the Black Panthers.
Yes.
When was that and the whole process with that?
Well, I came to Stony Brook, the State University of New York, when it was a new campus, relatively new. That campus, where it currently exists, is something which really was built beginning in 1964. Mm-hmm. And I came in 1967, so I was one of the new faculty that the university was putting together to create this new institution. And I came, as many other young faculty came from all over the country, all over the world, to join that faculty. And I joined because they offered me a job. I had other opportunities, but that one I especially wanted to do because it was public higher education. Mm-hmm. And it was meant for working people and the children of working people in New York, and particularly on Long Island, Brooklyn, in the New York area. And that was attractive to me, to build public education. I'm myself a product of public schools and public universities, so I had appreciation for that. And when I came in 1967, and I came out of a background of political activism in the civil rights movement, in the anti-war movement, mm-hmm. and was alert to what was going on in that realm out here on Long Island, even at that time. And so I discovered that there was an outpost of the Black Panther Party that was organizing free breakfast programs and health clinics for migrant labor that was coming up, working the crop, coming up from the south that would reach Riverhead and Southold for the potato harvest. And so I had a van, not a sedan or, Volkswagen Beetle or anything like that. I had a van. And that was handy for transporting food and people. So I worked with the Panthers. We set things up. We picked people up out on Doctor's Path and other places in labor camps. And so that was my first experience on the North Fork in 1968.
And where was their outpost, the Black Panthers on Long Island? Was that more by Stony Brook, or you just connected with them?
I just connected with them, and I don't really know where their center or their offices were. I never hung out there.
But because they initially started in Oakland,
California. That's right, in 1966. That's right.
But did you get their thoughts on what they thought of what was going on the North Fork, or just they wanted to help out?
They wanted to help out. They wanted to just develop these breakfast programs, which the Panthers had been doing in Oakland and elsewhere as they grew and as they developed chapters in various parts of the country. So that was a thing to do.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I can help, I'll do that. So that was my first experience on the North Fork in Riverhead and Southold, the old I Am Young potato grading there on Depot Lane.
Yes.
And so that kind of all evaporated in the late 60s, early 70s. I can't remember exactly when that stopped out here. I think probably 1970, certainly not beyond 1971. And I didn't think too much more about the North Fork. I was living in Mount Sinai, first in Rocky Point, and then in Mount Sinai and teaching at Stony Brook. And then in the late 70s, 1978, my wife's dad died. And so we came into a little bit of money. And so we were thinking, well, what can we do with this money? And by that time, I was living in New York City and commuting out to Stony Brook from there. And so we were thinking, well, where could we find a place to live? Maybe around Stony Brook, but it was too expensive. We didn't have enough money for that. But I thought, well, let's go check out the North Fork. It's really pretty out there. And I wasn't thinking about it in any political way. I was just thinking that we could afford a place, maybe, and it's beautiful, and it would be, nice to have. And we found a place in Peconic and bought it in 1981, and split our time between Peconic and New York City. My wife was teaching in New York in the CUNY system at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, and I was teaching at Stony Brook. And so we just were living out here, but at first we just removed from the community. We were just here, but we weren't really integral to anything that was going on out here. The Bonnickers weren't having anything to do with New Yorkers at that time. So in 1984, my wife saw a notice in the newspaper, in the Suffolk Times, that there was a lung association program at Eastern Long Island to quit smoking.
The one right here in Greenport.
Right here in Greenport. And I was smoking a lot, and I thought, okay, let me see about quitting. And I came into Greenport, and we had these sessions that the Lung Association did, and it worked. And I did, in fact, quit smoking. But that helped me understand that there really was a community out here. It wasn't just that I lived in a place and then commuted out, but it gradually started to sink in that, there's a place here, and I could pay attention and get something from it and maybe even contribute something to it. in the late 70s, the North Fork Environmental Council got started.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, of course, promoting ecological stewardship and restrictions on development and zoning issues that were biting on corporate developers and people who really wanted to make money developing the island, land out here. So the business community in town wanted to have a counterweight to the environmental lobby. And so they went to the town board. This is in 1985. And Frank Murphy was the supervisor. Mm-hmm. And the business community wanted to have a special panel organized that would be an official body appointed, of course, as volunteers, mm-hmm. that would be an economic advisory committee. We have these environmentalists, and they're telling us all kinds of things to do, but the business community should have something too. Mm-hmm. And so Frank and Paul Stoutenberg was on the board at the time, and others thought that was a good idea, and they set it up. They advertised, anybody want to volunteer for this? And I'm an economist, and I volunteered. And they put me on it, which was interesting, that I was accepted by the town board. Mm-hmm. And Jay Shondabear was on the board at the time, too. And there were 5 people on this economic advisory committee. There were 4 businessmen and me as an economist. And we met regularly, and actually met weekly, for a year to try to figure out what was the economic future of the town and how could the economic development of this community best unfold. Mm-hmm. But from the point of view of business, mm-hmm. To be, as I say, a counterweight to the environmentalists. Well, at that time, this is 1985, 1986, potatoes were selling for about $2 a hundredweight. You can't make a living, you can't keep your farm at $2 a hundredweight. And at that time, that's what was out here. It was mostly potatoes. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of vineyards. I think there were 4.
They were kind of just starting.
Just beginning. And also, in 1986, there was a tax revision in the Reagan administration. And in that tax reform, which was a massive bill, the tax treatment of vineyards and wineries was changed to be less sympathetic and to give less subsidy and less support to that industry. It was mainly a question for California, of course, where there was the big wine industry. But here, there was a real question whether those tax features of the law that pertain to wineries, if you change them and if you reduce those, would the industry evaporate, be economically unsustainable? In other words, people were wondering, is the wine industry just a tax dodge, or is it really an economically stable or sound proposition? There was no real answer to that for the North Fork. And I offered to study that and to look into it. And I got a grant from the Suffolk County Planning Department and the Regional Plan Association for all of Long Island, and also from the town board. Mm-hmm. I developed a proposal and basically said, look, we face 2 possible futures for this town. We can keep it agricultural and rural, but the wine business would be central to that because the potatoes can't hack it. Yeah. So we could do that if it's viable, or we could pave the place over and it would just be the rest of Long Island finally paving over with residential and commercial development, what we have out here. And that was the question. And I did that study with Larry Perrine as the local wine guy that I trusted and worked closely with. And we came up with the conclusion that it was viable, even with the tax changes, that actually the town did in fact have two possible futures. One was a future of agriculture and open space, but not with the traditional crops, but with these new types of agriculture coming in. And the other future was to turn away from agriculture and go the planning and zoning route. And that's what our report was from the Economic Advisory Committee. I worked with these other businessmen, and we all agreed after I did that study that that is, in fact, the situation that the town faces. And we made our report to the town board. Now, of course, that's a political question. It's not just a technical question, but what I was able to find in my research there, studying, and I went out to California, and I went to Virginia, and I went upstate in New York, where there was an established wine industry, to see what's involved and where's the money.
Yeah.
So what we found from the Economic Advisory Committee was that there was this possible future, and the town really had a choice to make. We didn't take a position what that future should be.
You kind of just offered it to them.
We just said,
to the board.
This is what's the situation.
Yeah.
Now you all figure out what you want to do with that, right? But it was a very interesting problem. Really, what should the future of the town be? How should it develop? And people had deep opinions about that. The business community, and in particular, the contractors and the builders and the real estate people, wanted a development future, not agriculture.
Yeah.
And the environmentalists wanted the sort of more agricultural sound, historical, cultural continuity.
Yes. Because I think they were probably already seeing that change on the South Fork, because I think the South Fork was starting to get more developed, and a lot of the land was being developed in the 80s.
That's right. There was a lot going on in the South Fork. But it was interesting, one of the things that is the case is that the North Fork is a much better environment for grapes and for viticulture than the South Fork, because there is such a thing as microclimates. And the microclimate on the North Fork is sufficiently better in terms of the number of days of sunshine as against fog, right? Because if you're out the ocean, you get fog, not rain. Not cloudy, but fog, and that changes the character of the crop and what's suitable there. And still to this day, the North Fork, there are some wineries and vineyards on the South Fork, but basically the wine industry in Suffolk County is on the North Fork and on the north side of Riverhead town.
Yes.
And that's because of that microclimate thing. So we found that. I discovered that working with Bill Sanick at the Cornell Extension in Riverhead on Sound Avenue up back there. So what happened once that report got released in 1987, 86, 87, people in the community started to get interested in maybe developing the political power and the political pressure to block the future that was pave it over and have residential and commercial in favor of the future that was agriculture, but agriculture of a different sort from what had been before.
Yes.
And I got involved with that process, sort of this basic community organizing. And I had some experience with community organizing before I got here
Yes.
in various environments and various circumstances. And so I started to look around and talk to people who came forward, at town board meetings or in the newspaper interview or letter to the editor. And what we did was we put together an organization that was called Southold 2000. This was organized in 1987, 1988. And it was to develop the political force and the political organization that could secure the future of agriculture and open space by the year 2000. That was the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And we pulled together quite a few different people. And just for the record and just so that they'll be known, Shelley Scoggin, who has the market here in Greenport now, but at that time was just starting out in Southold with a market. And she had this idea that we should just stop just using grocery bags all the time. Mm-hmm. Let's have not just recyclable, but plastic, woven shopping bags. And if people come into her store, and she would sign up others as an environmental thing, you'd get a discount if you come in with one of these shopping bags instead of using a new one. So, Shelley was also very much involved in trying to organize. And Gail Mariner from the Save the Bays, Joe Restuccio, finally we got the tax pack people involved. Mm-hmm. That was an interesting thing because the tax pack people tended to be pro-business.
Mm. Okay.
And we want low taxes.
Yeah.
Which is like a business refrain. But what we were able to show was that residential and commercial development raises taxes. Just go up island and look at what are the tax rates and compare it to what are the tax rates in rural areas, and you'll see that development raises taxes for a whole bunch of reasons. So Joe got convinced, and the whole tax pack crew got involved in this. Dave Mudd from the wineries and the grape industry. Troy Gustafson, who was the publisher, of course, of the Suffolk Times, was interested. Rich Caggiano, who was involved with the Chamber of Commerce, the Greenport Southold Chamber of Commerce. Bill and Ann Kremers, who were just citizens, and Bill later became a member of the planning board. John Roosh, who, you may remember the flag, the Pecana County flag that was made was looked like a nautical flag that was the shape of the east end of Long Island.
Okay, I don't think I saw
it.
It
had 5 stars. It was blue and green.
Okay.
A blue sea and then a green, 2 like triangles representing the North and the South Fork, mm-hmm. and then 5 stars for each of the 5 East End towns. And there was a whole move at that time to secede and to create Pecana County. So those people came in, and other agricultural farming people. So we really had quite a broad grouping of people. Freddie Waxberger from out here in Orient. And we just tried to figure out how could we increase the presence of this thinking, mm-hmm. and mobilize more and more people to be involved in the process of thinking through what does it really mean to have rural, agricultural, and open space development.
Yes.
Instead of what everybody knew and what it was automatic was this, just pave it over. Mm-hmm. So we would have these meetings and hold social forums and develop all kinds of materials for people while we were talking to the town board, while we were talking to the business community and others. And so that was the agenda of this outfit called Southold 2000.
Mm-hmm.
It took a couple of years of that, and then that morphed and transformed into another organizational form that brought even more groups and organizations together. And that was something called the North Fork Planning Conference, which, again, tried to hold local meetings in all the different hamlets, worked with Valerie Skopaz, who was the chief planner for the town at the time, tried to really mobilize and deepen our understanding of what this really would look like concretely. So in doing that, we ran into political issues, we ran into technical questions about what are we really talking about when it comes to open space and land use. And I discovered an outfit called the US-UK Exchange, Planning Exchange. This was something that was organized, I think, initially in Vermont, out of their land trusts.
Oh, like
the
Peconic.
Peconic Land Trust.
Yeah.
And there was a Vermont Land Trust. And we had been sort of working with the Peconic Land Trust, trying again to figure out what would be the policies, public-private partnerships, all that kind of thing. And we found out that there was this US-UK exchange, and what they did was to pick areas or towns or communities around the United States who would apply. And if your application was accepted, your community would be visited by a delegation of 8 professional planners, land use and zoning planners, 4 from the U.S., 4 from the U.K. Mm-hmm. And those 8 people would come and do an evaluation of your community and make recommendations. So that's a powerful thing to do. So we wrote up an application indicating what the goal is, indicating that we were in this situation of 2 paths, that we were trying to develop this path of agriculture, land preservation, open space, and that we were in a political battle about that because there was opposition in the town that came, as I say, from the developers, from builders, from real estate people, and they were very powerful on the town board at that time. Frank Murphy was long gone. Staudenberg was no longer on the town board. George Penny was on the town board of Penny Lumber. And, Scott Harris from Orient was the supervisor, but George really was the political force that was in opposition to what we were trying to do. So I remember writing up this proposal and trying to describe to people who'd never been here what was here. And I remember saying, we have all these hamlets, but the speed limit is 55 miles an hour between them. Right? These are distinct places. Southold is not Cutchogue, right? Greenport is not Mattatuck. They are distinct places, and we want to keep it that way. Mm-hmm. We don't want to have this sprawl homogenize this area.
Yes.
And so what we wrote was evidently good enough, and they actually sent a delegation of planners in 1992, in the summer of 1992. And at that time, the political scene was kind of heating up about all this because we had taken all these steps, these progressively more intense, deeper rooted conversations in the town. Mm-hmm. And now we were bringing these experts, an expert is a man from out of town. So here we were bringing these 8 people, and they were here for a week. And at the end of that week, in the summer of 92, they issued their report, their findings. And that was a meeting that was, I think at the town hall, and there was hundreds of people. Maybe it was at the high school. There were hundreds of people who came. It was extremely well attended because people were so interested in the community to try to understand what really should we do. Mm-hmm. And these guys from the planning US-UK crew had interesting things to say. Not least, what they said is, yes, you want to preserve open space. Yes, you want to preserve agriculture, farmland, but don't forget the woods. Woods are very important. If we notice, they said, as we drive around town, there's woods here. Those are precious. Don't think that the only thing you have to preserve is farmland and open space.
Yes.
And that was a very interesting observation and something that people also took seriously. So now we're in 1992, and we have this report which gave more weight and more authority to the claim that there really was this other future for the town, and we didn't have to have this land use going only to commercial and residential development. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we did early on, we brought Lee Koppelman, who was at that time the head of the Regional Plan the head of the Long Island Planning Board, which was for Nassau and Suffolk County. He was also the head of the Suffolk County Planning Department. And I can't remember the name of who came from the Regional Plan Association, a high-level person from there, if not the director. They came out here and did a forum about the future. And I remember the guy from the Regional Plan Association who had summered out here himself for most of his life. He talked about the Côte d'Asphalte, the Côte d'Azur, the beautiful thing. He talked about, if you're not careful, you're going to have the Côte d'Asphalte out here. And that really shook people, right? That was such a good kind of metaphor of what was at stake. And all of that built into this environment of community engagement and community involvement. We also, in the course of all of that, with the backing of the town board, because they had to do something to appreciate it. So they set up a planning operation that we were participating in of about 15 people to help the town come up with a plan. And I remember that we had representatives of all different organizations that were sitting with us, from the tax people and the business community and the finance people, all kinds of types. Mm-hmm. And Marty Sidor was there for the farms. And I remember the first meeting, we all went around, everybody said their name and what they were from and what they were doing there, and their desire for holding everything and developing the area properly. And Marty said, I'm here to make sure nothing happens that's bad for farms. Mm-hmm. And, which was self-interested.
Yes.
But of course was the whole point, too. Yeah. Right? We want to develop things here that are satisfactory and that will encourage agriculture, whatever, by zoning or whatever other kind of things we might come up with. So while this technical work was being done about what could a plan look like and who could bring together people to think about it hamlet by hamlet, there was also a political upheaval that was going on. Now, at that time, this is in the early 1990s, the Republican Party quite dominated the political scene here. And they did that in cooperation with the Conservative Party, but sometimes Democrats also would work with the Conservative Party which is a whole long history of how that came about. But what happened in 1993 was that the whole political establishment in Southold town, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and the Conservative Party, all united on a joint slate. Now, in New York State, you can have one candidate run on more than one party line. In a lot of states, you can't do that. In most states, you can't. If you're on the Democratic line, you're a Democrat. That's it.
You can't be like Working Families Party or Conservatives, like another.
At the same time.
Yes.
That's right. You have to choose.
Yeah.
Well, what happens in New York is you don't have to choose. You can run one candidate on multiple lines. So we in this planning upsurge that was happening through the North Fork Planning Conference and then the US-UK exchange, which the North Fork Planning Conference organized. We started to think, okay, this has to happen in policy. We can't just be talking about what would be nice. We have to actually have political people in office who can, do the zoning, do the regulatory policies, do whatever's necessary to secure this long-term future. But we didn't find any home in the Republican Party, for sure. No home in the Democratic Party. No home in the Conservative Party. And in 1992-93, we decided we have to form a new party that would be just local. And that party was called United Southold.
Yes.
And that United Southold party was led by Tom Wickham, who had not too long before come back. He'd spent 25 years overseas, basically, with the United Nations, and he came back and was very respected, of course, from a very respected family. So United Southold started to put forward the agenda that this whole planning process had been developing over like 6 years already. That's a long time to have this thing grow and have this thing bring more and more constituents in and more people involved of all different stripes that you wouldn't normally think would work together. The tax people with the environmentalists, with the chambers of commerce, with these ones and those ones. It was really quite a remarkable thing. So in the 1993 town elections, the United Southold had a slate of candidates, and the Republican Party, Democratic Party, and Conservative Party all had the same slate for themselves. And with Scott Harris and George Penny and that crew. And we won. United Southold beat that united slate of all those main political parties. And it wasn't particularly close. And we won because we had really done the organizational work. We had really done the technical work and combined those with the breadth of participation and also the town and hamlet meetings that we'd done to try to listen to people as to what they needed, what they wanted. If there was going to be development, there has to be housing somewhere. Where are we going to put it? Those are hamlet discussions. And people were impressed and enthusiastic about the fact that we were actually asking them. And we were actually trying to engage in a serious way, listening and also providing information. And that resulted in a political force that could overturn the political operations of this town. And in fact, we did. And we had, at that point, 4 votes. United Southold had 4 votes, and the developers had 2.
Mm-hmm.
But zoning laws, the New York State law about zoning laws is pretty difficult to navigate, and you really have to have a supermajority in order to do very much in the way of changing zones.
Yeah.
So there was some frustration there, and there was some difficulty in getting those things actually done, although we got a lot done. And in particular, things like cluster zoning and cluster building, so that if you've got a parcel of land, you can have a house every 2 acres. Instead of having a house every 2 acres, let's have one corner of it be developed, and you can have a house every 1/8 of an acre or 1/4 of an acre.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of it is still open and can be farmed.
Yes.
So develop also the purchase of development rights, that whole program, and encourage that. And go to the county and get the county to have those programs too, and the town to develop money for purchase of development rights. All those things we were able to do. And in 1995, there was, of course, another election. At that time, the supervisor only had a 2-year term. Now it's 4, but at that time it was only 2. And the United Southold, I think Tom lost by 180 votes. But we really did change the dynamic of the town, because even without Southold, United Southold in power, the attitude was in power.
Mm-hmm.
And it really wasn't possible any longer to go back and to go back on the path towards residential, commercial, unrestricted residential and commercial development.
Yes.
And so here we are, and, the North Road is still gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's agriculture all over the place. And yes, there's development, and yes, there are some places where there's more density and where there wasn't before. But the character of the town is still, 40 years later.
Still pretty intact.
Still pretty intact.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the result of all of that work. And at the time, there was very bitter opposition. And I had people who I knew in the fire department here in Southold, people who were developers and builders, contractors, who were yelling at me, right in my face, with their veins popping out, really.
Yeah.
How could you do this? You're a communist, and this is outrageous, and you're really hurting us, and blah, blah. Well, it turned out, not all that many years ago, that same person told me, that was pretty, important work that you did, and has come around to understanding he could still make money as a developer, as somebody who builds, as a contractor, but he doesn't have to ruin the town to do it.
Yeah.
So that, that's interesting, that I've had those experiences with people.
Yeah. Well, yeah, what was that campaign like when Tom was running with the Southold United campaign?
It was a very hard-fought and I would say vicious campaign. There was such a hostility from the builders and real estate people. Now, the Wickham family has been on that land since 1699.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time to be on that land, but it also means that they were on that land at the time of the American Revolution.
Yes.
At the time of the American Revolution, the Wickham family sided with the English.
Mm-hmm.
They were Tories. Now, when it comes along to the campaign in 1993, the George Penny crew and the people around him put full-page ads in the local paper and in the whole area. And full page ad. They were traders then, and he's a trader today.
Wow.
Yeah, really calling back that history, that family history, that they were traders to America then, and this guy is still a traitor to the American way because he wants to stop this development.
Yes.
That was rough stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And people didn't like it. It sort of backfired, that kind of a vicious personal attack and calling Tom a traitor. But that was what was going on.
Yeah.
And it was pretty interesting to, be involved politically in trying to combat that.
Yeah.
Now, I knew, like, about 10 days before the election, I knew that Tom was going to win. And I knew because I was in a firehouse and I could hear what these normal Republican voters were saying. And they were not happy with how that campaign was going, and they believed that Tom was going to win. And when I heard that from these Republican activists, that was part of the scene, and it was partly in response to that viciousness that people just did not like.
Yeah.
And in a certain way, we're seeing viciousness today in American politics, and people still don't like it.
Yes. It's still will turn people off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was just wanted to go back a bit and hear your thoughts on, because I know you moved to Peconic, but what did you think of Greenport at the time when you first came out to the area?
Well, Greenport was very down on its heels. This is in 1981, 1982.
Yeah. A lot of empty stores.
A lot of empty stores. The fire. Where Mitchell Park was not Mitchell Park.
Yeah, it was just empty.
It was empty, and it was it was a mess. It was just a mess. And the old shipbuilding and marine economy that was out here was very much down on its heels. And there was some gorgeous homes, because, and we looked, my wife and I looked out here, but we couldn't afford it because it was more expensive than we could afford even then. Mm-hmm. But the homes, that were built by old ship carpenters in the 19th century and had all that woodwork and all that detail and all those different elements that were so precious and gorgeous. But it was all really depressed.
Yes. And
now, of course, it's not, which has its own complications.
Yeah.
But it's, and there I think that, Dave Capel really gets a lot of credit for turning this place around and getting the carousel out here, and then fixing up, Mitchell Park and other things, and then making it a destination.
Yes.
So people come out to the North Fork, they come to Greenport, bikers and everybody else.
Yes.
And that's, great for Greenport, except for the, housing prices.
Housing prices, and then make sure that the locals don't feel like they're getting priced out.
Right. Well, that's always a problem.
That's always been a problem.
Yeah, it's a big problem. Not just here, not just on the North Fork.
Anywhere
in the country.
That's a problem.
If you go into New York City.
Yeah.
People are priced out all over the place. People are forced out. They can't live in New York City anymore. Not
to get too off track with the focusing on the North Fork, but I know you lived in New York City through the 60s and 70s and 80s.
No, I moved into New York City in 1974.
1974, but
that was when the city was really going into trouble and was flirting with bankruptcy, and the Bronx was burning,
Yeah.
And it was really quite dramatic. I mentioned that I had a van, and I parked it on the street, and that thing got tagged. And my wife has a sister lives out in Iowa, and we drove out to Iowa, not even particularly thinking about it. But that van, nobody understood what was going on with all the tags on that thing.
Yeah.
But that was New York at that time. It was a very, very difficult moment for the city.
Yes. And then also you mentioned the Southold Fire Department. When did you join the Southold Fire Department?
I joined the Southold Fire Department in 1991. I joined for a couple of reasons. Christmas Day of 1990, I got sick and passed out. And I remember as I was going out, my wife said, "Should I call 911?" And I didn't know what was happening. And I said, "Yep, I think you better." And I kind of came to in the rig. And there was Ed Boyd. And
It was in person on the fire department?
yeah, there were two people, in the fire department.
Yeah.
Because we run the EMS out of the firehouse.
Mm-hmm. Was Don Fisher?
No, Don was in the fire department
But
at
he
that
wasn't
time.
there.
He wasn't on the crew that responded to me.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was impressed by the way I was treated. And I thought, that's interesting. These guys seem like they're, would be good to learn from, good to hang around with. But also, this was 1991, I was doing all this stuff with the North Fork Planning Conference and beginning to, this US-UK thing going.
Yeah.
And who was I working with? I was working with a lot of professional people. And I just thought, well, where's the working class? And the answer is they're in the firehouse. Well, I thought, okay, here's two reasons to go join the fire department. Mm-hmm. Let me go join and see what's going on in that section of the community, because I don't have any contact with them in this community organizing that I'm doing. So I'll learn something. But it's also a group of people who really know what they're doing, and it's righteous work. Mm-hmm. So I went down to the firehouse, and I walked in, and there's a young guy, and he's standing up on the desk in the dispatch room with a bucket and a sponge. He's cleaning the wall up by the ceiling. And I walk in the door. Of course, I'd never been in there before. I don't know anything. And I say, "Hey, what do you have to do to join the fire department around here?" And he looks at me and he says, "You have to come through that door and say, what do you have to do to join the fire department around here?" So right away, I knew I was in the right place, right?
Yeah.
But both from the point of view of the care that I got,
Yes.
and from the kind of attitude that was shown to me by this guy as I walked in the door. So that was all part of, what brought me into the firehouse. And I've been there now for 34 years.
Wow. And how has that been over that time? Did you get trained and had to go out for calls?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of training. There's actually a lot more training now than there was 35 years ago.
Yeah.
And you want training because you want people to know what they're doing, and B, you want people to be safe while they're doing it. And so that means knowing what the protocols are, knowing what the equipment is, knowing how the equipment works, knowing what to do with a piece of equipment if it's in your hand, knowing how to cooperate with other people, because nobody puts out a fire or rescues somebody alone. You're always working with other people. So how do you work with other people? What's the chain of command? What's your obligation to your people that you're working with, to the public? All that stuff has to be learned and trained. And then, because we don't have a lot of structure fires out here, if you don't do it, you get rusty. So you have training. You go down to the Yaphank, to the Suffolk County Fire Academy, and you do training.
Practice, yeah.
So that you keep your skills up.
Yes.
And the same thing with the EMS work. You're taking a big responsibility when you go and show up and somebody is sick, or somebody's having a heart attack, or somebody fell and has a broken leg or a broken neck, or whatever you're dealing with, or somebody's in the water and you got to go pull them out. Those are all things that require training to develop those skills. And now the training is much more than it was when I joined. And when I joined, it was much more than it was when the senior people were in the department at that time, who'd come in the 1960s. So I would say the time and the commitment now is more intense than it was when I joined. But
in terms of more calls and...
Well, certainly more calls, but it's also just more time for training.
Yes. More requirements and training now than then.
That's right. That's right.
But even when I've talked with people from the Greenport, they're saying they've gotten more EMS calls and calls in general. I think even with the population out here, and obviously it picks up in the summer, but I think it's more than what they've noticed an uptick over the years.
Oh, there's definitely more calls for sure, but most of the calls we do in Southold are EMS calls. Now, we do have motor vehicle accidents, we do have structure fires, we do have brush fires, we do have dumpster fires. There are things that keep us going and keep us busy. There's also water rescues that we get involved with. But the most frequent call is an EMS call, which could be sick, could be a heart attack, could be a stroke, could be somebody fell, could be somebody's just sick, like I was, and need help and need to be transported. Lacerations, somebody is working with a saw and they cut themselves, they cut their finger off. Well, what do? You got to go find the finger, and how do you preserve it so that when you get to the hospital, you can give that finger to the doctor with the patient so that they can, surgically reconnect it if possible. So those are all things you have to train for.
Yeah. And even looking to today, it's probably been a struggle in terms of recruitment, or if you could touch on some of that, and whether people who have retired or just the younger population, maybe they don't have as much time to join, or they go off to college, so you don't have as many volunteers.
It is a problem to have people volunteer with all the other commitments that they have, whether it's studies or their family or their job. People are trying to develop their own lives. And, if you're in the fire department, you're 2 o'clock in the morning, you're going off someplace to deal with something.
Yes. Now
you're not getting sleep for an hour and a half or 2 hours while that call is going on. And then that messes you up for the next day's work. So, those are things. And then there's all the training and the time involved in that. So it is an issue all over the country, certainly in Suffolk County. In Suffolk County, we have 110, I think, or 111 volunteer fire departments. It's all volunteer.
Yes.
The whole county.
And there's some of them are saying they're having to get some paid positions, like an EMS driver, but it doesn't seem like people want to go that way, but if in the end it might have to be some places it would be outsourced, or a company would take over.
Well, there is a question about having to pay Now somebody has to pay, so that's the taxpayers, right?
Now you go to the town. I mean,
now you have to go to the to the fire district and ask people, okay, do you want us to hire somebody? Now sometimes, in the bigger departments, like if you go to Huntington or if you go to Smithtown or you go to some of the other, which are real, you could say cities.
Yes.
They still have mostly volunteers, but they do have professional drivers, the chauffeurs for the equipment. So if there's a run, you know that the apparatus is going to be there. Mm-hmm. Now, whether you have a full crew or a partial crew or how you're going to staff that apparatus and really deal with the scene, that is still mostly volunteers.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And different departments have different cultures. Some have just whoever can show up shows up. Others, you sign up, and on Tuesday afternoon, from 1 until 6, if there's a call, you're going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if it's Wednesday afternoon, you're not on duty, so you don't have to go. Yeah. So that way you try to rotate your membership through the 24 hours, 7 days a week, so that at every time interval, there's enough people who have committed to showing up. Mm-hmm. So, different departments have different cultures about that.
Yes. And I just wanted to go back a bit with, I know you mentioned coming out here in the 60s and going to some of those worker migrant camps. Mm-hmm. Did you have an opportunity to go to some of those camps even in the 80s and 90s?
Most of those had disappeared.
Most of them had by that time.
And I didn't have any contact anymore, any tie or any reason to do that.
Yeah.
So, I didn't really know. I know that up on Soundview, there was a labor camp behind the farm, that horse farm back there.
Yes.
And that burned one night, but there wasn't anybody in it. Mm-hmm. And now the character of the migrant labor has completely changed. Mm-hmm. Because when I first came out here, it was just a few years after Edward R. Murrow's Harvest of Shame.
Yes.
And that was the first use of television for serious documentary purposes. And what Murrow did is he followed the migrant labor coming up from Florida and the Carolinas to Riverhead and Southold, ending with the potato crop here. And that was all black labor. That was all African-American labor. Mm-hmm. And which was one reason why the Panthers were interested
in helping
in that community and that particular demographic, if you want.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that there's any black labor, African-American farm labor out here. I think it's all Hispanic.
Yes.
Guatemalan and Salvadoran, Ecuadorian, who replaced Puerto Ricans. I don't know that there's too many Puerto Ricans out here anymore either, but there used to be.
Yeah, because I remember talking to some Greenporters and saying there were a few even in Greenport working with the fishing, even going back to the maybe 1930s and 40s. But yeah, that seems to have moved on. And I think, because I've talked with Tom Wickham, and he said he has the work visa with the community in Guatemala, and they come over in the summertime. So that's changed, and we've seen change out here with that.
Yeah, Tom had Puerto Rican labor for a long time too before that.
Oh, okay.
And then I don't know what his dad had, if he was using African-American labor. I think in the 50s and 60s it was all black labor here. Now, if you go to the Southwest, now you're talking about Mexican and Chicano labor.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different scene in California and the grapes and all that. But here on the East Coast, and certainly on the North Fork, the demographic of the migrant population has really changed. And I think actually a lot of the migrant population isn't migrant anymore. They're here year round.
Yeah, I think most of them are here year round. Probably just a small percentage that are still on a. But and then he was saying that there was, I guess, before that they did have a large group come out, of Polish labor, but
Mm.
then I think they went to school here, and I think they didn't want to do that anymore, and so then that kind of disappeared, and then you had the African Americans come up too. But yeah, like you said, that's changed. But yeah, most of the you said the labor camps were gone by that time,
Yeah,
late '80s, early
yeah.
'90s.
Now, I think if you, a couple of years ago, I haven't checked recently, but few years ago anyway, if you go to behind King Cullen and Cutchogue,
Yes,
if you go way back, you'll find a camp back there.
that's just kind of abandoned.
No, 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 no,
No,
no. There are people there.
okay. I thought I've heard something about that, but yeah, I didn't know for sure.
Yeah, I walked back there one day, and there was
Yeah,
a bunch of Hispanic guys back there,
yeah, and
and
that
some shacks and places, to live.
well, and then we talked about workforce housing, and Tom was saying he was able to build housing on his farm, which was difficult, but he was able to do that. But I think that's just, in general, that's a problem for most people that are coming to the North Fork to work, whether you're working at the hospital or you're working in any hospitality or farm, but and even Peconic Landing, I think they were thinking of possibly building housing for people, but that's a challenge. And I know we've talked about the work that you've done in the 80s and 90s with the changing the course of the perception of what people were thinking of what they wanted the North Fork to be, and then
Hmm.
but getting to today, what are your thoughts on housing as an issue? Because that's always talked about, but I feel like when I do talk with the some of the town of Southold, there's kind of the we're working on it, but we're at the same time we don't want to develop land. I mean, we don't want to develop on creating sprawl and everything, but then building these close formed housing developments like Vineyard View.
Well, I'll tell you the experience that I had with the housing question when it came to that
Was at that time.
Economic Advisory Committee.
Mm-hmm.
This was in 1985 when we got pulled together, the five of us, to be the counterweight to the Environmental Council, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we met every week with different people in the business community. And at almost every conversation, housing came up. There isn't enough housing for our workers.
That was there.
This is 1985. They were
Yes.
already talking, or still, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
talking about this problem. They didn't want to pay the wages that would be necessary for the workforce to actually pay the rent,
Yes.
right? Because that's what you get wages for, right? Is to go home and pay your rent with the wages you get. So if the rent is real high, the wages have to go enough to compensate, and the business community didn't want to pay those wages. They also were concerned that if they didn't pay those wages and people couldn't live here, then they would commute from Up Island.
Mm-hmm. Which we do get some of that.
Which we do, but the business people were concerned about that because there are traffic problems. People, will come late. It's unreliable. What about when it snows? What about when it rains real hard? What about when somebody oversleeps and now the traffic is all kinds of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to this and listening to this for week after week. And finally, I said what I thought. And this is what I said, and this is what I thought. I said, I think that the problem out here about affordable housing is y'all want affordable housing for white people. But all I hear is if we have affordable housing, they'll be coming in. They'll come. So who's the they? People from Riverhead.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is that except black people from Riverhead are going to come out here if we have affordable housing? And we don't want black people out here. Now, we can't exactly say that anymore. And we certainly can't enforce that in our housing codes because it's illegal after 1968 to have discrimination in housing. But there was a time when you could have affordable housing for white people and you didn't have to worry about black people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said to these business people and to my fellow, not city council, not the town board, but our advisory council, the economic advisory council. We were all sitting around, and I thought that they would object. I thought that they would say, oh, wait a minute. What are you calling racist? But they didn't. They said, you're right. That's what they said. They said, of course. That's the problem.
Yeah, we don't want
them here.
From Riverhead, yeah.
Yeah. And certainly I worked with Bessie Swan in the Northwark Housing Alliance and the issues that they had. Of course, they housed many more white people than they did black people because there are many more poor white people than there are poor black people. The poverty rate among black people is higher. But in terms of actual numbers, there are more poor white people than there are poor black people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to have this racist attitude, you're going to cut off the resources for white people. So that's another example of how racism messes up white people, not just black people. Of course, it's much more intense. Obviously, it's not equivalent, but still, it's not so great for white people to have racism.
Mm-hmm.
Well, these business leaders said, yeah, of course, and what do you want me to do about it? If I do anything about it, I'll lose my customers. I had restaurant owners say to me, if I put a black guy out in summer, a black student working out in front of the house, my customers will leave because they don't want to be around black people. So that was an open, absolutely, matter of fact.
Wasn't hiding it at all.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And so this problem about affordable housing is not just about density. It's about who are we talking about. And that fear that among some white people that black people are going to take advantage of that, they're going to come in here, they're going to be living here, and we don't want it because they're dirty, they're criminals, they're whatever, we don't want them, they're from Riverhead. And I think that that is part of the culture and the historical nature of the community that we live in here.
And I think we touched on it a little, well, we talked about it before, but I think we discussed that there were communities in Greenport and Mattituck, African-American communities, but in terms of them, they were probably thinking, oh, well, bringing out more, we don't want that.
Yeah.
Whether they can stay in Greenport and whatever, there's a small community in Mattituck, but then thinking today, I heard with Vineyard View, that development, that in order to have that open and get federal funding for that, they had to open it up to all of, I think, Suffolk County, and the people didn't like that either, because I think which I get in a way, they wanted it to help people that were struggling already on the North Fork than having, but I get it's a balance, and we have had an influx of more people, whether after September 11th or after COVID, and the population is changing, whether we have more part-time summer people, and there is a more different demographic and even higher income bracket coming out here in Greenport too, but that's changing the dynamic. And I don't know if there's any tension, but I think there probably was even in the 80s and 90s. But I think that was because, I think Capel came out in the 90s and was wanting to get out of the city and real estate out here, and I think other people have come out here at that time, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that and seeing that changing demographic, and always people that were like, I'm getting out of the city and I can afford like a six-figure house out here.
Well, people who live in New York City, who are of a certain stratum of professional people, and whether they're in business or they're in academic life or wherever they are in the professional arena, finance and so on, traditionally in New York have a summer place, someplace, right?
Yeah.
They're in the Hamptons, they're down on the Jersey Shore, they're up in
The North Shore or
or they're up in up around Woodstock,
yeah.
or up in Columbia County,
Hudson Valley.
All there are places that people go.
There was always that.
Always that.
Even places in the Connecticut along the water.
Absolutely. To anywhere to get out of town.
Yeah.
Right. Town is New York City, and so that whole stratum is always looking for places where they could stay, where they could have a summer place. And that's how I got out here. I was living in New York City, and we thought, well, can we be somewhere else too?
Yes.
And when my wife's dad died, we had a little bit of money, so we could think about putting a down payment on something.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because we're in that stratum too, we're professional people, and we're looking around for a place to get out of town on a weekend or in the summer or whatever we can get out. So the North Fork, actually in the 1980s, was not oriented towards New York City at all.
No.
It was all oriented towards Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Boston.
Oh, okay.
People didn't market their product, agricultural product, the row crops and all that stuff, didn't go to New York. It went up to New England. So, because of the history of the development of the North Fork, the East End was settled from Connecticut.
Yes.
Right, when the Dutch were in New York. Mm-hmm. And so New York was always somewhere else, mm-hmm. and Connecticut and New England was more oriented, at least for the North Fork. The South Fork, because of the light, because it is a different microclimate, because of the ocean, in the late 1800s became a magnet for people from New York City.
Like a resort out and play.
Area. And a place where you could have a second home, where you could go, where you could spend the summer. And artists also set up there because of the light and because, mm-hmm. just the environment there is different from up here. So when I got out on the North Fork in 1981, New York City was not anything that people really talked about. The real estate agents here didn't advertise property like in the Village Voice or in the New York Times. They just didn't even think about it. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, New York City is very much part of this community.
Yes.
And that is a profound change. But it was late in happening, partly because the people here were not particularly welcoming of, outsiders, and also because historically there weren't those ties. People would go to this, to the Jersey Shore. They would go up to Hudson Valley. They would go to the Hamptons. Yeah. But gradually those places got more and more expensive, mm-hmm. got more and more difficult in traffic to get there.
Yes.
And people started to think, well, what about the North Fork? And what killed the North Fork was when the New York Times started to have articles, in their metro section or in their Sunday real estate section, big features on how great the North Fork is. Mm-hmm. And then that started to get discovered. And that then brought this money and brought also a change in the sort of political registrations, because the Democratic Party out here made a concerted effort to register those New York people here to vote here.
Yes.
Because your vote counts more proportionally here, right? You're one of 15,000 people instead of 15 million people. Mm-hmm. So that kind of changed the voting situation out here too, mm-hmm. And trended it more democratic. But because it's more moneyed people than it is working class people, the Democrats who are coming out here are economically a little bit more conservative and culturally sort of more liberal.
Yes.
There's a bigger gay community, and there's a bigger community of sort of people who are we don't have hippies anymore,
Yeah.
but basically people who are countercultural.
Yes.
Are more likely to be up here, but when it comes to their economic, they want low taxes. They want what David Brooks published a book in 1999 called Bobos in Paradise. Bobos meant bourgeois bohemians. And he was onto something.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're seeing here.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a very different kind of scene.
Yes, it's changing, and I wouldn't say we're exactly turning into the Hamptons, because I think we've been able to preserve the landscape much more, but we are getting more businesses and things that do cater towards the newer people that have come out here, whether it's certain types of businesses that they've had in Manhattan, or like what we've seen in the Hamptons. But we are, I think, losing a little bit of that. Like, we have the open space and we have the vineyards instead of the farms, is less of the farms, but I think we're losing a little bit of the working class feel out here, which is kind of unfortunate in a way. I think in a way that with money it's hard to stop that with blocking that from happening.
It is, and although it can be shaped, and you can do things about how big a house you can have in relation to the lot, in relation to the other places around you. What's the character of the community? Can you have zoning which requires new building to be in the character of what's already there? That's a question. Well, just because you have money doesn't mean you have to ruin the character of the place.
No. And we've had a lot of houses here that have been renovated and restored historically, which has been good.
Right, in Greenport.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's also, a situation where with COVID, people learned and developed the techniques to work remotely. So there's a lot more of that going on. I have a guy who lives right next to me in Peconic, just right next door, who, is a summer place. This is like a summer cottage. And he bought it, and it's still pretty much a summer cottage, but he's a finance guy. He works on Wall Street. But he's out here almost all the time, and he's working from home, and it's cheaper, and it's nice, and he can walk to the beach and all that kind of stuff. But he's not a local. He's not a Banneker.
Yeah.
And it is a different kind of culture. It's a different, and of course, the local people who really are local, born. You have these bumper stickers, North Fork native, and you have to show your birth certificate in order to get those those little bumper stickers. They're not very happy about these changes.
Yeah.
Although they can make some money, and we have in the fire department where I hear about it is from these contractors and builders and carpenters and plumbers who are working on these houses.
Yes.
And these renovations. They can't believe how much money these people have. They can't. It's just incomprehensible. And they talk about it. They say, what that guy's putting into that place? How much money he's spending on a pool? How much money he's doing? Blah. It's just crazy. And there's just a chasm
Mm-hmm.
between those two communities.
Yes. And I think there's always been a little bit of whether people have come out here because they like it, but at the same time, I think they like you and other people have wanted to get involved and help out, and maybe some people might talk down and say, "Well, I know what I'm doing. You're all backwards out here," or something like that. But I think there needs to be a balance in between so that the people that have been out here don't feel that they're just being talked down to and like they don't know what they're doing. We've been in the city and we know how things work and what should be done out here.
Well, that is a sure turnoff, right?
Yeah.
So, as far as my work, I've just tried to be just a person
Yeah.
who is engaged and interested and wants to help, and I'll do whatever I can. And I'm certainly not a local. I've been here 41 years. It doesn't count. Or 44 years now.
So I think someone came on and said, "Yeah, I've been out here for 75 years. I'm still not a local."
Absolutely not. So, because people talk about it. If I sit in the firehouse at a dinner and we're all sort of talking, and people are talking about who they went to grade school with and what happened to that teacher and whose grandmother was what and whose grandmother was married to that guy who was a cousin of my grandniece, and all kinds of personal family ties
Mm-hmm.
that connect this community.
Yes.
And you would expect that in a community,
Mm-hmm.
in a small community, because that's what it is. There's so many people and they all know each other. So that has its charm too. It has its not just charm, but has its grounding.
Mm-hmm.
I when I was writing up that thing to the U.S.-UK exchange, and I said, between the hamlets, there's 55-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Mm-hmm.
But the hamlets have character, and they really do. And that character is grounded in the people who live there and who have lived there, grew up there, went to school there, got married there, raised their kids there, know whose other grandparents were there. All that stuff makes a community.
Mm-hmm.
And those communities are different from one to another out here, the hamlets.
Yeah.
And that's fine, but you have to understand, you have to respect that, and it takes time to appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
And people who come out here and just want to have what they want, a nice house and no traffic and no lines in the grocery store.
Yeah.
And a tradesman at their beck and call.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very different kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
And, of
Yeah.
course, it comes from a very different kind of culture,
Yes.
which has its own merits,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it has its own power and its own energy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the trick, is how to live in those worlds and communicate and respect one another.
Mm-hmm. And now just looking at the North Fork today, we talked about some issues, but what do you think are the three biggest issues facing the North Fork?
Well, certainly housing
Mm-hmm.
is a tremendous issue. I think water quality is also, a very big problem. Groundwater, as well as the bays and the sound,
Yes.
and the creeks
Mm-hmm.
and inlets. Those are precious resources, and I think people understand that. But then, what do you do, and how do you really protect them in the long term, I think those are deep questions that still confront the town. And that's what those are where I would focus
on.
Yeah.
And I was curious, just going back a bit, did you, because I think so Joe Townsend was supervisor at one point back then for Southold. Did you have to work with him?
Oh yeah, Joe was great.
Yeah.
Joe was very much part of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And we had I mentioned Marty Sidor, but Betty Brown came. She's another farm person, but she grew for a farm stand in Jamesport, and she was a stalwart in all of this, also from the agricultural point of view. So we had all that going on. Right now, I'm not aware of anything that continues that tradition of citizen involvement, citizen engagement, real community organizing around these questions. There's organizing around specific projects, like should a marina expand or not? And in Mattituck with Strong's Marina and all what's going on there.
Yeah.
The Vineyard View and housing stuff, or the housing issues that were in Cutchogue, back behind the school there, the church school.
Yeah.
Those very local sort of uprisings are almost in the NIMBY category. They're just, we want to protect this particular place. We don't want this kind of development. There is that kind of community organizing.
Yes.
But to have something that's more comprehensive, that's forward-looking, that's really trying to shape the future of the town as a whole, that fell away. Things come, they go. And I don't know if it's time for that again, or who would do it. But, that might be the third thing. You asked me what are three things, and I said water and housing.
Yes.
Maybe community engagement, and the mobilization of people here to really influence and shape, consciously struggle with what is this town and where is it going for the next 40 years. Because we took care of the last 40 years.
Yeah.
And, we had quite an effect, I think. It worked out pretty well.
I think so.
So now it's other people's turn.
But do you think we need another form of United Southold moving forward? Or you think that's something that's possible? Or do you think it's, especially in today's political climate, it's so divided that might not even be able to happen again?
Well, the political climate we're in this country today is, like you say, very divided. It's also very dangerous.
Yes.
There's some really serious oppression and suppression and they're organizing fascism. While we're sitting around having tea, these people are snatching people off the street and sending them off to El Salvador. These people are taking judges and putting them, behind bars if they don't like them. These people are really dangerous. And they're getting ready to cut Medicaid. They're getting ready to take very big swipes at Social Security. That's very serious. They're cutting off the health, National Institutes of Health, and the research that goes on about medical care. That's actually happening.
Yes.
That's not just, that's in some book someplace, maybe. So those are very, very consequential, and also consequential not just nationally, but they will have consequences locally.
Yeah.
For sure. If they do away with Medicaid or really cut Medicaid in half, I don't know if Eastern Long Island Hospital could survive. Because how much do they get in Medicaid payments? A lot. What happens to San Simeon if they really chop Medicaid in half, let alone get rid of it?
Mm-hmm. Those effects will and probably will be felt locally, definitely.
Definitely, and not just by the people immediately cut, because if San Simeon can't survive because the Medicaid payments are shriveled up, then it can't survive for the people who are paying full freight either.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be gone for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, do we need to think about that? Yes, we do. Do we need to be politically engaged about that? Yes, we do. Now, that's not exactly a town problem, but that is a problem that affects the town.
Yes.
And that's a problem that, who's our representatives in Congress? Who's our representatives in the Senate? What are we really doing? And that requires, again, personal, direct political engagement by ordinary people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what community organizing is about. And that's what I think, at that scale, that's a whole different scale. But that's something that we also need to think about in Southold. And people are thinking about it and are working on that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Of the rising tide of fascism in this country.
Yes. Well, usually I just ask as like a final question. I can ask it now. But what would you hope to see for the North Fork and its community further down the line?
I would hope that we could find ways to keep the character of the North Fork as a coherent community,
mm-hmm.
or a collection of coherent communities that keep their own character, so that Cutchogue is Cutchogue and not part of a sprawl.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, still a question. I think I would also look to find ways to keep the water quality so that we can eat I just was reading in the Suffolk Times, they're closing creeks
mm-hmm.
because there's too much pollution.
Yes.
Well, that's not good. We shouldn't have to close the creeks.
Mm-mm.
So what do we do about that? And what does that mean about restricting what people can do with their property, what people can do with their boats, what people can do with their money? Those are questions that I think we will continue to have to look at, dealing with questions of environment, housing, and just the ability to live here as a working person.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're going to have to figure out how to continue to do. And that's what I'm going to continue to try to pay attention to myself.
Yes, definitely. No, but I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on today and sharing a lot of the work you've done in the community, and continue to stay involved in the community and share your thoughts. So I want to thank you for all the work you've done.
Well, thanks for that, and thank you for having me come on and talk about it. It's a part of the history of the town that people don't really know about all that much and don't talk about all that much.
Mm-hmm.
But the character of the place that we have, which is still quite lovely and quite impressive, it didn't just happen.
Yes.
That took work. That took work to think through, to organize and to find a combination of community organization and political power, electoral power. That combination of social movements and electoral politics, that's a combination that I think we need to pay attention to all across the board for all the issues that we face, to make a decent society and to make a place where we can all thrive just as human beings with respect for one another.
Yes.
And that's the agenda for me.
Definitely. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for helping us document that history.
Absolutely.
Sure enough.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 224 with Michael Zweig. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.